Welcome to another episode of Electrotechnology on the Job, and today we are looking at installing an oven, a hot plate and a couple of lights all in an apartment, which will provide its own set of difficulties and interesting things to look at. So please continue watching and see how we go. So in most apartments, you'll find the circuit breakers actually in an enclosure somewhere hidden away. And in this case, it happens to be here in this cupboard. So if I go to the cupboard, you can see there they are there. And I can then isolate the circuits I need to isolate. In this case, it's going to be the oven, because I'm going to remove the oven. And then when we need to do some work on the lights, we'll isolate the lights. Go through our 7 steps of isolation, and that way it's all safe for us to work on. Depending on the apartment you're working in, depends on whether they're going to be inside a cupboard or maybe they're just inside the doorway. Sometimes they're in the laundry. It will all depend. You'll just have to have a look when you're out there working on the job. All right, let's get to it. So this is one of the lights that we actually need to take down. It's attached to a concrete ceiling. So you need to keep that in mind whenever you're doing this kind of work, that you're not going to have a plasterboard ceiling or something that you can actually access. There's no access in this ceiling, it's solid concrete. So I'm just going to disconnect the wiring that goes into the back of this light fitting here. I'll disconnect the active, earth and neutral. And then this is being held up. Literally, there is a J-box, a junction box inside the concrete, which was put in when they were pouring the concrete. And literally, this is all that's holding this light fitting to the ceiling. So when we put the new light fitting up, we may need to adjust a little bit. We may need to drill a couple of new holes and screw into the concrete or somewhere to try and attach it. So we'll take this apart. Okay, so this light is actually a little bit different. Most light fittings, you put your stripped terminated wires into a terminal strip and you tighten up with screws. But this one's different. This one literally has some sort of push-in mechanism. So they've stripped the wires, they've pushed them in, and it's grabbed hold of the wire and it won't come out. So the only way I could get this off was actually cut the wiring off, which is not ideal because now I've got to restrip the wires. And if you were to do that numerous times, then your wiring is going to get shorter and shorter and shorter. So yeah, there you go. First time I've actually seen that. A first for Electrotechnology on the job. All right, well, light fitting's off. Now I can get the new light fitting, organize it. There is one spot here where they've drilled in and they put a green raw plug into the concrete. And obviously there's spots here to screw into the junction box, which is inside the concrete. So we'll get the new light and we'll put it up. So this is the new light fitting that's got to go up on the ceiling, but obviously because it is a concrete ceiling, then I need to drill some other holes to hold this up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drill one hole through the base near where the entry point for the cable is. That way it will allow me to put a screw into the junction box sitting inside the concrete slab. That'll hold it in place, and then I can just drill another hole somewhere and I can then screw that into the concrete using a green wall plug. And away we go. When you connect in the new light fitting, generally I find it a little bit easier to do the wiring, wire it in actually first before I actually mount it to the ceiling. And that's really for two reasons. One, it allows me to get a little bit of movement if I'm trying to work with only short mount cable, and two, it also allows it to hang by the cabling if I need to muck around to adjust to get it to actually sit correctly on the ceiling as well. So just a little tip there. Now this is old wiring, so it's got the old bare earth, which now actually has a green plastic sleeve just slid over the top of it. You'll find this in a lot of older buildings. That's the way things were done many, many years ago. We don't do that anymore, obviously. Now it's all insulated earth all the way through, regardless of the building or the job that's been done. So I'm putting the screw through the hole that I drilled into the light fitting. This will then line up with one of the mounting holes in the junction box that's sitting in the concrete, and I can tighten that up, hopefully without any too many problems. I've had to use a little bit of a thicker screw simply because I don't have one that fits exactly into the mounting block, but this should do the trick. And then once I've got this pretty much where I need it to be, then I can just mark out where I'm going to drill the hole into the concrete, and I can drill that hole, mount that, and it's done. Now, if you can find your way to make your life easier, always do it. There's a hole here, and it's going to match up almost exactly where that existing hole was in the concrete. So I'm just going to drill another hole into this light fitting because it's easier to do that than it is to drill into the concrete. And then I can just screw straight in. Think ahead. The next light, I may not be as lucky as I was with this one, but you never know. There we go. That is starting to sit nice and solid as it can be, obviously, on this particular ceiling. It's quite a flexible light fitting. Once I put the diffuser over the top, it'll be good. It's not going to go anywhere. There we go. That's good. Now I've got another light to do, and I'm going to repeat the same process. So I'm going to go away and do that light, then we're going to come back and have a look and see what the job looks like then. Okay, so I'm at the other light fitting, and I've just come across something interesting that you need to know about. When I've gone to disconnect my cabling on this side, there's actually two black wires. Remember, you should have a red, black, and green. Right? Red being active, black being neutral, green being earth. And in this case, there are both black ones. One is active, one is neutral. Which one is which? You could do a test. You could get your multimeter out and you can test. We can work that out fairly quickly and easily, see which one's which. We can also do a visual inspection. And in this case, if you know how your circuits work, then you'll know which one's which. I have two black ones twisted together and one black one that's single. The single black one is my switch wire because the two that are joined together are looping to the next light in the unit. So I can tell just by looking at it. But that's something that you need to be really aware of. You're going to come across that in a lot of old buildings where they used to use black as a switch wire, and sometimes they'd even use black as actives, which they probably shouldn't have done, but they did, because the rules actually state you can use any color at all for any cabling as long as you only use the green for earth. So it could be any color, even if it doesn't seem to meet any standards. That's just the way it is. So knowing that, when I take this off, I just got to make sure I always keep the neutrals. I make sure they're twisted together tight. They don't come apart, because if they come apart, then I've got to try and figure it out using my multimeter. But if I keep them together, then I know that yes, they are definitely neutrals, and the other one is my switch wire. All right. Okay, so I've had to do some adjustments on this light fitting here. I've had to put a new hole, entry hole in for the cabling. And the reason I've had to do this is because when they put this J-box into the concrete, they would have been working off the floor plan and they put it in the center of the room. But then what has happened as the apartment's been built, they've then built in these cupboards and they've built all this in, added it in, and this is now no longer in the center of the room. So this is why knowing what's on your floor plan and knowing what's going to be installed later on is really important. If they had known at the time all of this cupboarding was going to be installed, then they probably would have moved this junction box over across and make that more centralized. It is what it is. You can't change it now because it's in concrete. So what I've had to do is add that extra hole so I can put the light kind of offset. But what has happened is because I've done that, the wiring coming out of the junction box is not long enough, so I need to extend it. So first thing is drill a hole. The next thing is that is metal and there's obviously going to be sharp edges around that, so I've tried to clean it up as best I can, but I really need to put some sort of bushing over that. And a trick to it is grab a bit of TPS cabling, take the wire out of the TPS, gives you just the outer sheath, and then you can put that into your light fitting and it'll just sit on there nicely. It's a little bit of fiddling around initially getting it on, but once it's on, that'll create a bushing around the hole and then you're good to go. Just like that. Nice shroud now. Cable can go through there without being nicked or damaged by the sharp edges of the metal. Perfect. Now to extend the cable. So all I'm going to do is just get some wire, attach it with a BP connector or a screw connector, tape it up, tuck it back into the box there, and then those cable ends will be long enough to reach into the light fitting. Wire light fitting up, screw it up just like we did with the other one, and hopefully that's it. Remember, always put a double screw connector on your earth. That is as per the Australian standards, and obviously tape up all of your connections as well. Okay, so there is no way around it. I have to drill into the concrete for this particular light fitting. You've always been really careful when you're doing this because you don't know where the conduits are going and you don't want to hit a conduit that could be in that slab somewhere. So always take your time, check to see if you can see any direction which cables are going from the junction box you're near, and then just take your time drilling through. So that way you don't hit anything, cause even more problems. Light fitting is up. That's 2 light fittings done. That's it. Let's continue on. So this is the wall oven that we need to remove, and on top of it is a glass hot plate. So to get this apart, the really easy way to do it is the wall oven has to come out first. And if I open it up, there's actually a couple of screws on the edges. So I undo those 2 screws, and then this whole thing should slide out, and there should be enough cable behind there to extend it out, and we disconnect. Once we've got this apart, we can take it out. Then we can access this, because the hot plate will be held together by some clips underneath. So when we undo those clips, we can then just lift that off, tip it over, disconnect the power cables coming in, and we can get the new one, and we can just put it all back together in reverse order. Really that simple. So let's see how well we go getting this out. Okay, I've got the oven out, and what we've discovered is the hot plate is not independently wired. Now what I mean by that is this. This hot plate has a plug on it which plugs directly into the oven, and most ovens and hot plates come separate and you wire them in separately. So it means we're gonna have to apply some more cable, gonna have to get some more cable, and the new one, because the new one's not like this at all, so that we can wire the new one in directly, as well as the back of the oven. Now to get the oven apart or get it disconnected, there's actually a panel down here that I can just take a couple of screws off. This will come off, I can get my terminal strip and disconnect it, and away we go. So that's what we're going to do. Okay, what you can see here is this is a 2-phase oven. So I have 2 active cables. One of these will be phase A, one of these will be phase B, and then I have my neutral and my earth. So the phase, it doesn't really matter which phase goes on which, either way. Now the new oven may or may not be 2 phases, and I believe the new oven is only single phase. So one of these phases we actually won't need anymore. And we may probably, we'll piggyback the second phase, we'll use that for the hot plate. So we're going to disconnect this, always double checking, making sure that it is definitely de-energized. We've gone through our 7 steps of isolation, so we know that's now the case. So I'm going to take off phases first. I'm going to leave the earth there. The earth is there to protect me. Now the way this has been put on, it may be a bit difficult to see, but the way this has been put on is the wires have been twisted around the termination screw, and that is quite normal. That's the way we actually do this. So it again goes onto the terminal strip like that and holds in place. So let's take them off. So as I mentioned, this top here, this stove top, should have some clips underneath the bottom. I've just had a look and discovered it has no clips on the bottom. It's actually just sitting there. There we go. So it just pops out like that. There we go. One less hot plate. Now we can get ready to wire in the new ones. So the stovetop that has to go in here does not fit the new one. So if you ever wondered why you need to learn carpentry skills as an electrician, this is why. Because now I have to take a jigsaw and I have to cut out this bench top at a slightly larger size. And I've got to be really careful because I only have a fine tolerance, because the lip of the new hot plate is only about 5-10 millimeters at best. So I don't have a huge amount of tolerance for me to cut. So I've got to be really pretty accurate with this when I do it. This is why it's so important to have all of those extra skills. So those plumbing skills, those metal skills, those carpentry skills, all those other trades. This is why electricians need to use them, because we have to do this sort of stuff all the time. So we're going to cut this bench top, and hopefully the new stove top will fit nice and snug. Always wearing your safety equipment when you do this. Make sure you've got some glasses on. When wiring up the hot plates, you'll find there's usually a wiring diagram because the termination points won't always be super clear. So on this one, there is a actual wiring diagram here. So I'm just looking at that, comparing it to this, so I make sure I get the correct connections in. I have to make a join in this cable, and I'm really trying to think of a way of avoiding making a join, because this is coming out of a concrete wall. So once I cut it back, that's it. There's no pulling in another cable. So I'm trying to think of a way that in the future isn't going to become an issue. But at this way I'm looking at this, there doesn't seem to be any other option other than to make a cut, join it, because I've only got a single cable coming out of the wall. The old oven had a plug going from the oven to the hot plate. This has got separate installations, which is the way it's usually done. So yeah, I've got no choice. I have to do that way, and it isn't my ideal way of doing things, but this is just the way it's going to have to be. So we're going to make a cut, we're going to make a join, and put it all together, and then done. Okay, so this cabling here that I've been stripping, this is a slightly different type of plastic sheathing, and it's because it's basically has a higher temperature rating, because it's going to sit behind an oven. So I need to join these cables, and then what I'm going to do is I need to put a little bit of conduit, flexible conduit, over the cabling that goes to the hot plate just to protect it. These will then get tucked out of the way up against the concrete here as best as possible. There's not a huge amount of room between the back of the oven and the concrete. Ideally, we'd box it, toss it in behind, inside the wall, but this is not going to be the case because it's solid concrete. So we'll just do the best we can and get it out of the way so it's not going to be affected by any heat from the oven. Okay, that is it for this episode of Electrotechnology on the Job. We have a working hot plate, we have a working oven, and we have 2 working lights. It has been an interesting job. Some things didn't quite go to plan, but we got through them and we figured out ways around them. The biggest issue we had towards the end there was just trying to get the oven actually in. The oven, when it was sliding in, was just tilting a little bit, and towards the back there was a timber rest that was hitting the timber rest and wasn't sitting on top, so we had to kind of fiddle around and lift it and a bit of mucking around. You're going to find these things will happen all the time. Again, this is why we learn all these different skills as electricians, not just how to wire things up. We need a whole range of skills. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. It's been tiring. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.